Okay,
So,
we're live.
did you, so when you did your podcast, what were the challenges you felt you faced? Mostly, in terms of getting your content out in front of your viewers or the listeners. Like, what were the main challenges? You thought you faced, whether like in terms of the content or like purely in terms of like how to target your content to the right people. You want your podcast to be featured in front of. So, like, what were the challenges you faced?
Yeah, so when I first started, the main issue that I had was finding a hosting service that I liked.
Uh-huh.
I tried doing my own coding or working with a friend to develop a hosting site, but that was super duper tough. It's just not really
Yeah.
worth it with however many hosting services there are now. So instead of doing all of that work, I had a lot of help from a friend, Carlos, who lend me all of the recording stuff, kind of showed me how everything works and microphones and a soundboard and everything like that. So
Mhm.
I was really fortunate in that way. Aside from that, I found that I really wanted things to grow organically and still do. I haven't made a big marketing plan or anything like that. I just
Yeah.
kind of post them, and I have the occasional person that sends me a message and really enjoys it. But it's
Uh
it's
huh.
really it's really been something that's more of a low key thing that I do, that I
Yeah.
haven't put a ton of effort into cutting up video, because I know that's something that I think that I'll end up doing in the near future, is
Hmm.
actually cutting video up and putting video onto, or sorry, cutting audio and putting it onto video clips, and then creating more of an accessible platform through TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that, so that you can reach more people. But for the
Yeah.
meantime,
Yeah.
it's just been real natural growth. I think the most challenging part of it was actually editing, because at the start I wanted to kind of cut them down a little bit and make them more just smaller bits, because right now they're full length conversations that last an hour to 2 hours, which a lot of people aren't super keen on. I had a few professors and stuff that I did them with that told me nobody's going to listen to these if they're longer than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to listen to a
Yeah.
podcast longer than
Yeah.
20 minutes. And
That's correct.
so,
Like, considering the attention span of people is so short right now
mhm,
nowadays.
yeah,
Yeah.
I,
That's good.
yeah, I think that I think people are able to use their time that they would have been focused on other things a little bit more now.
Hmm.
I think audiobooks and podcasts are a good example of that, where you can turn your 2 hour commute into work, or your 1 hour commute or whatever, and you can turn that into
Yeah.
something a little bit more. You can learn things. So I think that's kind of what I was going after. And I tried editing, but the sound of my voice I found was super annoying. I could hear all of the weird syntax things that I do in my language that I didn't like. I used to say like a lot during conversations. I would
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then it was like this, and then it was like that, and I found that very very frustrating. So I decided not to
Yeah.
cut my audio or anything like that, and just post it as a raw file. And so that took a huge amount of work away from it. But I think in the future it'll be good to start cutting up the most significant pieces of an episode, and then
Yeah.
having those a little bit more of a teaser.
Hmm. Like, you can even, I saw a few people, they were putting out like kind of like bloopers, like behind
Mm-hmm.
the scenes,
Mm-hmm.
just like in videos to show people like what was happening behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and kind of like attract people towards their podcast in a way to depict like everything is genuine and more real,
Mm-hmm.
as in opposed to like being scripted. So what are your thoughts about a podcast being scripted rather than like being natural? What did you think, and what did you gain from your experience like while recording them? Like, were you more inclined towards them being scripted, or were you more inclined them towards being like natural?
So I've always done them naturally,
Hmm.
which I think each of them have their merits and their pros and their cons. And so with a scripting, it's a lot easier to get all of the information that you'd like to address out there right away. You develop a script, and you know exactly what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, and you practice it, and you you get a lot better at reading and speaking from that sense.
Yeah. Plus, you can
And
also control the time, right?
yeah, totally. Time control is a really big factor, especially with people that are wanting to shorten the lengths of their podcasts or
Yeah.
make the information as to the point and accessible as possible. I think that an issue
Mm-hmm.
with that is that I think that would actually be a really good means of going about an individual person doing a podcast. So
Yeah.
only talking to the camera, basically, you're talking to your audience rather than having a dialogue. I think
Uh-huh.
what ends up happening with for me personally is that my mind is so tangential that I'll jump off on different things and want to talk about different things in the middle of one thing will spark a thought or an idea that goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah.
that's the main merit to me of the non scripted, but also non
True.
scripted. I've listened to me talk before, and
Uh-huh.
as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, oh wow, there was this thing that I could have said in that moment that would have really tied everything together, but I didn't. So there's always that hindsight regret of
Uh-huh.
not being able to articulate yourself in the manner which you would in an ideal world.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a frustrating part of the non-scripted, but I think that both of them, you kind of have to live and die with what you do.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's very well said. Yeah. Yeah.
it's tough though. Like it's tough to find which medium you want to go for.
Yeah. I totally agree, man. I've also felt that like the more information you consume, the more difficult it is to stick to one topic, because out of a certain once you're talking on one topic, there'll be something which will totally a different thought will connect in back of your mind related to the same topic, but in a different context. And then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you'll notice yourself jumping from one topic to totally different topic, just to elaborate more. So I totally get that point, man. Yeah, it happens to me also. If I'm on one topic, suddenly my brain would jump to something else
Mm-hmm.
and be like, let's talk about this, and then I'll be like, okay, I gotta go back and finish that topic first.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good point you picked up.
Mm-hmm.
So, the most interesting question I wanted to ask you, Josh, was what made you start the podcast in the first place? What was your goal or your drive behind it? And was there any particular thing you wanted to achieve out of it? Be it helping people, or satisfying your own goal. What was the thing that drove it?
Yeah. So my I got really involved with my ex-girlfriend's family. I really felt like I was a part of that unit, that group.
Uh
And
huh.
her brothers a few times had talked to me about starting a podcast with them. And
Okay.
so I think they would have been a lot more artistic with it. I think they wanted to talk about game reviews and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was super duper on board. And then after we broke up, I just decided that it was something that I wanted to do on my own and just,
On your own. Yeah.
yeah, long form conversations with people that I thought were interesting.
Uh
And
huh.
and it slowly grew from there to the point where I decided that it was something that I was going to do. And yeah, that's pretty much why I started it. And I continued to do it because I had a few episodes, listened to them, realized that I didn't like the way that I portrayed myself or spoke or any of those things. And from there, I decided that I wanted to get better at how I present myself in those situations.
Uh
So
huh.
from that point on, it was a practice. It was something that I got to do where I could work out my ability to speak and
Yeah.
learn how to speak more fluidly and articulate. And so it was something that was I was pushing and it was pushing me at the same time.
Wow, that's good, man.
Mm-hmm.
So, were there any challenges you faced, in terms of being too self conscious, that I have felt this, it happens to me. I'm sure it happens to a lot of people that um, once you record something the way you were mentioning, and you go back and listen to it, then you have all these questions in your mind. Hey, is my voice too funny? Or
Mm-hmm.
hey, I don't like my voice. Or hey, I should like you were mentioning, you were saying the word like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So all these thoughts they keep on coming and bothering you. So how did you overcame that, what was your like 2 cents on overcoming that, and like how did you do you know how did you overcome that? Is my question.
Yeah, so there are lots of things that I think jumped right away.
Uh huh.
Um, and a lot of those were just in the ways that I spoke, the the language that I was using. I
Yeah.
didn't believe that it was precise enough.
Okay.
I thought that I was moving around a discussion a little bit too much with filler words, which I really didn't like. And I think that my voice is funny and strange, and it,
Yeah.
it it makes me cringe to hear myself talk in a
Yeah.
recording.
Define filler words. Like, what do you mean by filler words?
Like um like I think they're different for each person, actually, and I think that we
Mm-hmm.
use them to differing extents depending on who we're surrounded with and how nervous we are. So I think that regulating our for me, I found that regulating breath really helps me to focus in
Yeah.
on things,
Mm-hmm.
and that has allowed me to avoid using filler words. And I try to be very conscious of it. And the people that I spend time with, I think that they're conscious enough
Yeah.
of the things. So I'll ask them if I use filler words. Apparently, I use really, really a lot and very, very. So instead of just saying really or very, I say really,
Yeah.
really. Like, I really, really
Mm.
like this, or this is very, very big. So
Yeah.
there are those things that I. It's a little bit of a Pandora's box, to be honest, because every time that you improve on something, there's always something else that pops up next. It's very, very seldom that you can completely reshape your vernacular and your syntax when you speak and be
Uh huh.
satisfied with it, because then you have a conversation with someone, you get nervous, and everything falls apart and you go back to your old habits. And that's what happens with stress, is that when we become stressed, we tend to fall back on our most basic learned principles.
Yeah.
And so first thing that I become super stressed in a conversation, I'm sure that I start to revert back to my very, very, really, really. And a way that I actually got around that was just posting things instantly.
Yeah.
First thing I'd finish an episode. There was one episode that was the subject matter was very. It was. I think someone shared a lot of really personal information that was critical to their lives,
Yeah.
and I withheld posting that for a week just to give that individual time to decide whether they wanted it in the world, because that's another thing that happens is once you post something, once you've said something, and once you
Yeah.
post it, it's out there, and you can bring it back. But if something starts to happen, that things snowball and you've said the wrong thing,
Yeah.
then the things can snowball and it affects all areas of your life and people perceive you differently, and it's tough
Yeah. Absolutely.
to go back and make comments on things that you've said.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I took very seriously, was
Yeah.
being very precise in the way that I spoke and not saying things that I would regret in the future.
Yeah. And it's like it's super hard to like retract the words like once spoken, or like
Hmm.
once like a video is out, it's out. You cannot take it back.
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, you're right.
and even if your
So
intent is different from the way that people,
perceive it.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
say something and someone takes it the wrong way, or someone sees this different side of that, and
Mhm.
they call you out on that, I feel like people are under so much scrutiny now with how specific we have to be when we talk, especially in public, especially people that are figureheads and speaking continuously. You say the wrong thing once and your career is done, your reputation is gone, all of these other things that are, it's quite, it's definitely a scary thing.
It is. It is, man. Absolutely. And like you're right. Especially like if you have like a person like who is a well-known person, and like if they say something wrong, like for them to retrace it now is kind of impossible. Then it also kind of puts you in a limbo to like with
Hmm.
the thoughts that, hey, should I go ahead and like post this, or should I like hold back? So it like defeats the purpose of like the entire conversation of the podcast, right?
Hmm.
That's like one more challenge, like, because I what I have felt is that people can be comfortable with recording something, but once it's recorded and they listen to it, like, it can totally change their perception. They might not feel comfortable as comfortable they were before, compared to like, afterwards. So did you think like that happened in your during your time recording podcasts? Like, was there any particular experience where like someone was pretty comfortable talking about something, but then when it was out or it was recorded, they were like, oh, no, 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 we can't
Yeah,
do that.
yeah. Uh, Not including the episode that I talked about earlier with the sensitive subject matter. There was one that
Uh-huh.
there was one that I did quite early with a really good friend of mine, and there was wine involved, and we just were hanging out, having a really good
Yeah.
conversation. And
Yeah.
at the end of it, we kind of looked at each other and went, I don't think we can post this, especially as being because
And
for me personally, especially at the time that the podcast first got going, it wasn't that I was just myself. It's that you represent a bunch of other things whenever you speak. You represent the place that you work for, you represent your family, you represent all of these things that you wouldn't really think about, but all of those things can all of the things you say can come back and impact the people in those areas. So it can represent your family, and it can represent the for me it was the TRU Wolfpack. And every single time that I presented myself in public, I was always representing the club and the community. So that was something that we had to be really conscious of. And yeah, my friend and I pulled
mhm.
cord on an episode because we decided, hey, this probably isn't going to go well if a bunch of people hear this.
Totally. So like, so you never went and like posted that episode?
No, no, no. And it wasn't like we said horrible, terrible things about people or anything like that. But he was in a he was in a position of authority, and he was quoting Big Mouth and stuff like that. And he was really, really good at doing voices, and it was a very it was interesting. It was interesting because I don't think that either of us would have felt that we couldn't have that conversation around our best friends or even people on the outskirts of our friendship. But it was a personal conversation. We talked about some stuff, and first thing we stopped recording, we decided that we probably shouldn't post it.
Okay, that's interesting, man.
Mm-hmm.
Challenges, man. Like all these challenges, like which normal people can't even think of, can like happen because I think like there's a normal perception amongst people that like, hey, recording a podcast is super easy, but when they start like doing it or like sitting through like the things, they find out that actually it's like more challenging compared to like how easy it appears, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your like thoughts on that?
I've had a lot of people reach out actually and ask me about how to start a podcast, and it's been a mixture of scripted and non-scripted people. I think scripted, you have to be a little bit more conscious of, number one, my biggest thing was always making the person that I was doing an episode with comfortable.
Table, yeah.
Um, a lot of that involved the space. So dimming the lights, and
Uh-huh.
okay, if it was a good friend, we'd have a beer or something like that so that both of us could relax. And that's
Yeah.
something that I found helped, because
Yeah.
that starts to shut down your frontal lobe in your brain, which is for decision making. And so I'm sure that I've gotten a couple good stories that I wouldn't have if I hadn't brought out beer, especially with one of my friends, Doug. He was an absolute rock star. The dude's just full of stories. And after a
Yeah.
beer or two, he was really into it. And so
Yeah.
that's something, is making your guest comfortable. I've found that
Mhm.
that was really, really important. And
Yeah.
a big part of that is also how you speak to them. So it's not an interrogation or anything like that, but my
Correct.
goal
Correct.
is always to have less of an interview style and more of a,
Mhm.
hey, this is just, we're having a conversation about this thing,
Yeah.
and then we're going to put it out there because I feel everyone that I had on is someone that I felt had an interesting perspective on life. And I thought that those experiences that they shared would be helpful for other people. And that was my secondary. I would say that's actually close to that. I think that's why I started it, was to bring in multiple perspectives from people that could potentially have a positive impact on people's lives if they had listened.
Uh-huh.
And then after I heard my voice, a big goal of mine became becoming better at speaking and articulating my thoughts. And so those were really, really closely related to one another, was the betterment of myself, because I like to think that people act selfishly a lot of the times,
That's correct.
regardless of whether there's a positive outcome for other people. I think that in the back of our minds, we're always, I think it would be, I'm not sure the best way to say this, and definitely not ignorant, but I think that it would be underestimating our nature to say that we're altruistic beings and that we always want the best for everyone else, regardless of how that comes off to us. And for me personally, I'm hyper agreeable, super agreeable, really have a tough time saying no. So that's something I've had to work on quite a bit. But I do think that even when I am being agreeable, that's in some case for myself and for my own comfort zone. And so that was, yeah, that was a little bit of a tangent, but I think that the big thing for me was bettering myself. And then after that, it was, how can I make life a little bit better for other people? How can I share these experiences and have people share their experiences?
Yeah.
And how can that positively impact the people that listen?
That's wonderful, man. And like you were mentioning that like you did receive few like text messages from people like who heard your podcast, right? So like, what was the sentiment like of the people? Like, I'm pretty sure like, you know, once like someone relates to your story, or where like, you know, they come out and tell you that, hey man, this really helped me, or this is what I needed today. I was going through a shitty day, but like your podcast actually like, you know, brightened my day up. Like it gave me something to look forward upon. So like, um, what were these like messages like which you received, and like what was the impact like you felt that like, you know, that had, you know, on you personally as compared to like your impact on people's? So what did you think like was, and like, and what was the best message that you received which, you know, really made you happy and gave you like the drive that, hey, I need to like, you know, get better, I need to like put more content out? So what was your experience? What was that one thing which happened?
Full disclosure, most of them were actually people just asking how to do a podcast.
Okay.
I don't think that a lot of people that messaged me had actually listened to it. I think a lot
Okay.
of the people were saying, hey, I'm looking at doing a podcast. I think that you did a really good job.
Yeah.
How do I do that? How do I make a podcast better than yours?
Yeah.
Because people want to start off at a footing where they can move up. So
Correct.
that was my goal, was to offer some kind of footing to anyone that asked, so that they could make a podcast better than mine, so that they didn't have to go through everything that I went through to start off. And
Wow, that's good. Yeah.
yeah, and so the people that did message me, there have been a few people that have messaged me that said, hey, I really enjoy your podcast. And one of the people were from my high school that I never knew or anything, but she messaged me saying, hey, we went to high school together. I just thought your podcast was really cool. I've listened to a few episodes. It's really, really interesting. It's cool to see how you've changed from the kid that wore a triple XL sweater, sweatpants, and slippers to school every day and had a mullet to this kind of weird guy now. And so I think that was a fun conversation for me, because I got to contemplate the journey that I've gone through over the years.
That's good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like so funny, man. Like, internet is such a like powerful thing that like, you know, it connects you to the people like you have even like forgotten about, like, and you don't they're not even like in front of you every day, but then like, just like an example of this girl, like how out of nowhere like she somehow saw your podcast and decided to reach out. So like that's amazing, man. Like the world has become actually like so much smaller due to like all these things. So yeah, that's fantastic, man.
Yeah,
So most of, yeah.
sorry, no, you go.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, we're just so interconnected now, and we influence people at such a higher rate, and people in turn influence us at a really high rate if we allow them to.
Mhm.
So there's been, over the past, I would say, couple hundred years, just this exponential increase in information available. And with the advent of the internet, and particularly YouTube, and things keep coming and coming and coming,
Mhm.
that are able to teach us things. And that,
Yeah.
to me, that indicates that people want to know more, because these things thrive, because someone makes an Instagram account or a YouTube channel and they talk about, let's say, investing in stocks or
Mhm.
neuroscience or language, anything like that.
Yeah.
They build these things, and they are receiving positive feedback from people. And so people build more things and more things and more things. And we, the mediums that we have to access information has gone up so
Yeah.
much,
Yeah.
especially over the past 30 years, that I think it's really, it's a cool testament to humans and our desire to better ourselves and to understand things at a more understanding things better. That's probably the best way to put that.
So essentially, like, what I think you're trying to say is that, like, our learning capacity has increased, and like we can, I think we have access to so much content nowadays that, like, I believe that, like, in today's world, like, if someone wants to learn a skill, and their excuse is that, hey, I don't have the proper information,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't know where to start. I think that's the biggest lie they are telling to themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, hey, like you were mentioning, man, everything is available online. There's everything. There's
Mm-hmm.
tons of videos on YouTube. There's tons of content on internet. So I think, like, this is the best era, like, in which we are living. And I think, like, we are fortunate, like, to be able to learn skills at a much faster rate compared to, like, going through all the books in the ancient time. Like, people had to go through lots of books to
Mm-hmm.
gather new information, new knowledge. But now you can just look at, like, a small video, like, hey, how to cook, like, sunny side up eggs, go to
Right.
YouTube, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than, like, going through a recipe book in the past, like scrolling through pages. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's something pretty good. And Josh, like, what was, like, your one thing which, in terms of, like, one challenge which you think you overcame in your life, which was, like, very tough, which, like, at you were at a point, let's say, where, like, you almost didn't know, hey, what to do,
Mm-hmm.
and which you can relate to, like, lots of people nowadays. So was there, like, any time in your life where you thought, like, something was super challenging, and then you overcame that out of, like, lots of hardships and struggles, and then, like, the end result was, like, pretty, like, positive and energy, full of energy, like, is there any experience, like, you feel that can, like, help people, which you would like to share? Because honestly, I remember, like, when I met you, I remember I think you fractured your left foot, right? And
I
then
think I had just ruptured my right Achilles.
yeah, again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I still remember, man, like, I asked you, so, like, hey, Josh, like, so what's gonna happen? Are you gonna quit volleyball? So you were like, hey, I don't know. But then, like, the same fucking next day in the same week, I see you at the gym, like, practicing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, what the fuck? So I have seen you personally going through challenges and, like, finding a way to look at it from a positive note and coming, like, out of it. But is there, like, anything major, like, which you would like to share, which you think can help people, give them some motivation, to not back down?
Yeah. So I think that I have, I'd say 4 general arcs
Uh-huh.
in terms of story development. So something I've been working on lately actually is putting together some kind of course that allows for people to understand the process of the hero's journey a little bit more. I think a lot of storytelling is, I think storytelling is predicated on human experience. So
Mm-hmm.
the journeys that a hero goes through in, say, a Marvel film or
Yeah.
anything like that, something where they experience adversity and then they overcome that adversity and then they're defeated again and then they come back and they show that they've improved and their quality has changed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all an alchemical experience, and I'm looking for a way to join the philosophy of the hero's journey to psychology to I would say more Eastern philosophy and religion. I would like to add all of those together and toss in a little sprinkle of archetypes and Jung and put that into a course. So I think that I have 4 general arcs that would probably be fitting for that personally. One of which being the change that I made in my academics. Another one being reconnecting with my mom after not seeing her for 8 or 9 years.
Wow.
And then rupturing my Achilles. And most recently I've started on another adventure, which is rupturing my other Achilles. Yeah.
Okay.
So
how's that going?
I just got on my boot now. So I got on my boot about a week ago, and
Yeah.
it's interesting for things to change so much. I think that as humans, the way that our brains are organized is that we compartmentalize our lives. So let's say that you move to this new place that you're moving into, and a month later, it's going to feel like it's been 3 months because you're in this new place, you're in this new spot where everything's different, everything's changed. And so I think that our perceptual clock changes, and we process information, or we perceive that we process information at a different speed. So for me, rupturing my Achilles was everything before that feels like it was part of a different life. And now even getting out of the boot, that feels like months ago, it's been a week.
Yeah.
And right now I'm trying to learn how to walk again. And so that's probably for me, the next step is just grinding rehab and using the tools that using the toolkit that I've developed to optimize my recovery and go back and play volleyball.
That's fantastic, man. So like, Josh, like going through all these like, hard times, like where like you ruptured your Achilles, and like you said, you're almost about to rupture your second Achilles. So like, this is quite challenging, and it can like have a big toll on your mindset, right? So what was that one thing which like, kept you going, that, hey, like, this is something like which, cannot defeat me? So what was that one thing, or like one self-talk, you used to give yourself to get out of like things? Because I'm pretty sure like, you must have thoughts like every day, defeating thoughts, right? It comes to every human being after going through a challenge. So what was your experience like?
I believe that every experience is an opportunity.
Very well said.
Yeah, I don't really believe in negative experiences. I've found it really difficult to articulate because it's so outlandish. But I really think that suffering is the way that we increase our capacity. I think there's a general dip in quality of life. So from I think that hell is a very real place. I think that it's universal in religions, in large religions, in Buddhism, in Christianity, everywhere. There's a place for hell. And so I think that that's a philosophical place that we go to when our life is consistent. We dip. And my goal has been to find the best way to start to increase. So to get out of hell, that's the idea, is how do we start to alleviate ourselves of the burden and accept the suffering and allow that to actually improve our character and improve our quality. So there's this really good book called The Art of Liberation Through Understanding of the Between, or Understanding in the Between. And now it's called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So so it's this religious doctrine. And it talks a lot about meditation and breath work and mindset and focus and and the whole time I really believe that lots of religion and old philosophy and old storytelling, it's trying to say something, but at the time it's really difficult to say something because now we have so many advances in technology and science that we've increased the amount of things that we know. So for an example, when someone talks about something 100 years ago, they might actually be talking about 8 different things at the same time. So an example of this is in what's his name, the author of the Gulag Archipelago, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. So in his book A Day in the Life of Eisen Denisovich, it's about the gulags and a man surviving in the gulag. So it's just one day in this guy's life, and this book of how they had to. It's a book of survival. That's basically what it is, survival day to day. And there are several times in the book that in the mind of Eisen, so there are a few points where he sees someone that is low on the dominance hierarchy that gets pushed down by someone that's higher, or he thinks to himself, hey, I can bully this person because they're lower than me, or hey, I can't bully this person because they're higher than me. And we've come to understand that that's what happens in baboon tribes as well, and that's how you can actually dissipate your stress levels by attacking someone lower in the dominance hierarchy than you. So a baboon will reduce its stress if it's stressed by biting someone lower than it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So that's this thing that I'm sure Solzhenitsyn didn't know that was a biological mechanism, but that's something that when I read that, I thought, oh wow, that relates really well to this. So back to the course of the art of liberation through understanding in the between, I think that the in between is that area of dip, because that's what it is when someone passes away or when someone experiences what I would consider to be an ego death or a metaphysical death. So you're not actually dying, but the person that you were does die. The person that you were, you start to come out of it like you're escaping an old skin. So you start to shed your old skin and become a new you. So I think that art of living or art of liberation through understanding in the between is understanding the process of redevelopment of a new self, of a better version of yourself.
Okay.
And that's a process that Carl Jung considered to be the development of the self. And the self is this higher version of you, this person that you strive to become, that you have to work towards. And the only way to work towards that is by facing the things about yourself that you don't like. So for me, that was, for example, speaking poorly and not articulating myself perfectly and using bad filler words. So that's a more or less poor example, but I think that drives the point home of, we have these things that we know that we have to work on, and they're tough. But the more that you understand that process of getting out of that dip in life, of getting out of that hell and moving towards the thing that you want, the more that we can understand that process, I think the faster that we can evolve personally.
That's something like which I truly agree with you upon. And I really like the fact when you mentioned that, like, how in order to move forward in life, or to move forward from one phase, we have to leave or let go of an older personality, right? So or shed a totally old skin to get into a new skin, and then begin a total new journey. Let's say if you're facing, or if you're facing a very low moment in your life, you try to get out of it. So it all comes down to, like you mentioned, on how hard we can work on improving ourselves, right? So it all comes down to we taking up to the challenge that, hey, I really want to get better at this. Hey, I want to change the situation. So I think I totally agree with you on that, man. But why do you think, Josh, why do you think it happens that I've seen it happened to me also in the past, that whenever we are about to make a change, there's this feeling of fear which cripples into the back of our mind that, hey, don't do this, or stop. So what do you think like that fear is, or where it is coming from, like, and how do you think, like, is the best way to overcome that? Because like what the approach I took was, I heard Mel Robbins. So she gave a very beautiful like technique that whenever like you're trying to talk yourself out of something, just go 5 4 3 2 1 and
Mhm.
then like go back to doing the thing again. So that personally changed me. But what do you think, like, is your go-to thing, or like what do you think like is the best way to overcome this, where like you just like snap out of it and go back into moving towards the decision?
Mhm. Well, for me, a lot of it has become breathing techniques, which I think was a key element of that
Uh-huh.
book that I was talking about, the Book of the
Uh-huh.
Dead.
Yeah.
I think that was something that they were striving towards, and it's something that we haven't understood up until, I would say, the past liberally 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of the amount that breath has control of our lives has been more and more researched, and it's becoming more and more understood. And I really think
Yeah.
that's for me a very significant part of my process is breathing techniques and controlling autonomic nervous system. So the
Mm-hmm.
autonomic nervous system isn't actually automatic like you would suspect from the Latin translation,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we can control it a little bit more. And for me, especially, I found this while playing sports, it was this difference between being high and being low, and knowing when to be high and when to be low, and developing
Uh-huh.
the the breath and the body control
Yeah.
to release norepinephrine, adrenaline,
Mm-hmm.
and how to scale that back. So I've even been playing with that a little bit more recently.
So you're saying we can control that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of a good example. So one thing that's super interesting is something I've been thinking about for a while now is so there's this thing called synesthesia, which is the ability to combine or perceive stimuli differently.
Uh-huh.
That's a bad definition, but I'll try to explain it a little bit more with this example.
Okay.
So sometimes so you're born with tons and tons of connections in your brain,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and over time they get pruned, so they get taken away step by step by step. And one of them is this thing called synesthesia, where people can see sound.
They can see sound?
Yeah, so you play a key on a keyboard and someone says,
Yeah.
"Well, that sounds yellow.
Oh,
That
okay.
sounds red." Something
Okay.
like that.
Yeah.
So Billy Joel's someone that had synesthesia. I think Lady Gaga has synesthesia as well.
Uh-huh.
So it just hasn't been pruned the way that it has in lots of other people. And in that way, it's this combination between what we perceive and what we think.
Uh-huh.
So when you see sound, obviously
Yeah.
it's as real as it could be. But there are a lot of other examples. So if you ever take someone for a date
Mm-hmm.
and you get them an iced coffee, they'll consider your personality potentially colder than if you were to get them a warm coffee.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so we have all of these connections in our brain that are really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
We can't pull them apart. We can't say that this is here and this is here and they're mutually
Uh-huh.
exclusive. Nothing can combine those two. So one thing that I practice is cold shower breathing.
Okay.
And so I get into a shower, put it as cold as it can go, and just breathe. And that breathing and that stress that's being put onto my body and my mind, that
Uh-huh.
actually increases your capacity to undergo stress at a later date.
Oh
So,
wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
so it's this epigenetic change of you're not only experiencing the stress, but you're increasing your capacity to
Mm-hmm.
experience stress in the future.
Yeah.
So I really think that that's a good philosophy to go about anything that you feel stressed about, is saying, I feel stressed about this. If I jump into this thing, then it'll make me less stressed in the future, as long as I handle it
Yeah.
properly, as long as I
Yeah.
handle it and understand that this is a process,
Mm-hmm.
and that everything that we do, as long as we do it even in the mindset that we're growing and that we're improving, that will
Yeah.
improve our results. So Carol Dweck is someone that talks about this a lot, and she's developed this whole new side of psychology called growth mindset. And that's this idea that we have so much plasticity in our brains and we can change the way that we think about things. And the more that we believe that everything is process oriented and process driven and not result driven, then the more we can increase our capacity. And that makes sense not only neurologically, but philosophically, because if you say, I can't get any better at this, or I'm just not a good drawer, I'm not a good writer, I'm not good at this, then you're never going to give yourself the chance and you're never going to get better at that. So to understand things as a process and knowing that our brain is plastic enough to create new neural circuitry and combine things and improve at things and grow in the way that we want it to, it's really a tool, but it's also a master. And I think that's the best way to look at the brain, is that we can mold it to become a better version of ourselves. So we're working on each other simultaneously.
Yeah. Wow, man, that's like pretty like interesting. Like I didn't even know like half of this stuff, so that's pretty good to like understand. So do you recommend like any particular like books like on like reading like more about the brain and like how it functions, or like how you can like or even like on meditation, like how you can better your breathing, how you can work on breathing? Because a lot of time I've seen that people, they get into this habit of starting like to meditate, but they don't actually understand the concept of meditation, and then they tend to give up. So they'll try it for like 2-3 days and then they'll be like, oh, I cannot do this. So is there like a better or easier way which like you can suggest people, or like how did you like manage to continue with uh, meditation when you first started? Like I'm pretty sure like you had the same thoughts, right? That hey, like I cannot do this, or hey, it's stupid, it's not doing anything. Because people go into meditation with expectations that it's like miraculously going to change something big in their life, without understanding that like they are trying to like just work on understanding who they are, right? So what's your take on that?
Yes, there are a few things. With meditation, experiencing rapid growth is really, really hard in a person. If you think about it from a physiological perspective, just more of an aesthetic perspective than a physiological. But if you go to the gym every single day for 4 months, other people will notice your results faster than you will.
True. Yeah.
So that's something tough with meditation, is that if you dive into it and expect to see your own results super duper quickly, it's going to be very, very difficult to continue the practice, because you're not going to see that positive feedback for a while. And also you're living with it day to day. So maybe you increase your ability to sit down and read for an extra 30 seconds, an extra 1 minute. But that has a positive feedback loop where if you can do that, you continue to incrementally increase day to day. And my big issue with meditation is people think of it as a place you're going and not a path. So people want to get into this state of meditation where you lose complete proprioception. So you don't have, you lose the feeling in your arms and your hands and your body. So you don't know where you are anymore. So it feels like you're floating in space. And people want that. People really want that. People want to feel their chakras align and feel the sensation of light and bliss in their body. And maybe that's along the path, but it's not the end of the path either. So with meditation, often the goal is to get somewhere, whereas it's often referred to as the practice or as a practice. When I talk to my friends about meditation, my friends that are super into it, we talk about, my friend will often ask me, hey, how's your practice going? Because that's what it is. It's not a job, or it's not something that you're doing to get somewhere. It's something that you're practicing, because to practice something means you're getting better. And as with meditation, you'll never get to the state where you're a perfect meditator. That's never the goal of meditation. That's never been the goal, is to reduce anxiety or anything like that. It can get you there. But to me, the way that I see it is that it is a practice. It's something that you're never going to get good at. I guess that would be a good way to put it. Like even me, I've gone to the point where I can meditate for 16 hours a day, and
Wow.
It's not,
Wow.
and I don't feel good at it. Like, it doesn't feel like I'm good at meditating
Yeah.
because there's always a little bit more. It's always a little bit further.
Yeah.
So, and it's not about clearing your mind either. That's a really common misconception as well. It's what I've found good, because meditation can go off in so many different streams. You can do Buddhist meditation or Zen
Uh-huh.
meditation, or you can do
Yeah.
Vipassana meditation. There are all of these different meditative models that you can go after, where you're looking at body scanning and breath work. To me, it's about just letting your mind flow and accepting the thoughts as they come and really diving into thoughts. So I also don't think that it's good to press thoughts away. There's a really,
Yeah.
really good guided meditation by Alan Watts where he talks about meditation and your thoughts. So your thoughts being a cloud and your mind being a lake.
Uh-huh.
And for your mind to be calm, for the lake to be calm, the cloud or your thoughts has to completely dissipate all of the rain,
Yeah.
that it absorbs, all the thoughts that you have. You have to let those happen before they'll stop. So you just have to accept them and go along with them and go to the very end of that rope. And then once you're at the end of the rope, there's nothing left. And then the thoughts will stop. So if you're consistently thinking about something and you go to meditate, it's not going to
Yeah.
go away like that. It might get worse,
Yeah.
actually, that you think about it more and more and more and more and more. But at some point, your brain
Yeah.
stops and goes, well, I'm done thinking about that.
Yeah.
And then the lake is calm. Your mind becomes calm. And that's when the proprioception stops. And that's where, so something that he says is that there's nothing that you can do to stop those thoughts from coming. And to attempt that is to attempt smoothing rough water with a flat iron. You're only going to make it worse by trying to stop it.
Yeah. Very well put, man. Like, I think that's like one major like dogma people had, like, in terms of meditation, that like, if you're getting thoughts, like, you should like stop thinking about those thoughts, or like you should start like fighting those thoughts. But you said it like very well, man, that the more you try to like not think about it, your monkey brain is gonna like kick you in the ass, and you're just gonna go back and think about it again.
Yeah.
So you're constantly stuck in that loop, and now you're not meditating, but you're just like focusing and going round and round in those thoughts, right? Beautifully put, man. Like, in order to like calm down the lake, you got to like pour everything out of the clouds first, or let go of everything. Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I think that's one major thing, which like, that's a good insight you provided to people, man. Beautiful. Because I feel that like nowadays people have easy access to drugs, rather than like, because meditation, to be honest, and in your experience you must have seen, is something which you got to work on every day. It takes time, right? And the way you gave the gym example was perfect. You cannot see the results, but other people, they see the results before than you do, right? So you put it like in a very good way. So I think like nowadays people, rather than taking the more challenging route, which is more beneficial in the longer term, people are like kind of like trying to find escape through the shorter means, right? Quicker versions, like drugs, or like medications, antidepressants. So I think meditation, as per what you mentioned, is something which, like, if everyone incorporates, it's going to change like so many people's lives, man. Right?
Yeah. And even in a non-meditative way, because meditative is the idea of sit down meditation is very limiting. You can't be in the middle of an argument, or you can't be in the middle of a sports game or something, a super stressful part of your life, and just sit there and sit down. Like, unless you're in India and you're in the middle of a supermarket and you're trying to decide between the big ghee and the little ghee, you can't sit down and just start meditating without someone calling security.
True.
So there are all of these different breath exercises now that are enabling people to take control of that autonomic nervous system to get out of anxiety for a few minutes. Or to get into anxiety for a few minutes, because there's this inverted U in competition, where if you're super relaxed, you're not going to do great. If you're super anxious, you're not going to do great. So there's this middle ground of being anxious and relaxed, and that's where you hit your flow state, where you stop really perceiving things and you kind of just go through the motions. Your body knows what to do, and you just do it. So so that's another place where you can incorporate breath work, where you can take deep breaths into your belly and slow down your autonomic nervous system, or turn off your autonomic nervous system, and stop releasing norepinephrine and adrenaline, or norepinephrine, which is adrenaline, sorry.
Yeah.
Or you can breathe super duper heavy and deep, super duper shallow and fast, and that'll increase your adrenaline. So it's kind of like deconstructing the nervous system response. So when you see a bear, there's going to be a particular physical response.
Yeah.
Or when you're in the middle of an oasis somewhere in a nice hot pool surrounded by palm trees, there's going to be this calming response. So we can actually deconstruct that and reverse engineer it so that we can create those states of mind that happen, those physiological states and those states of mind that happen when we see the bear or when we're in the oasis. So you can create that same sensation of, wow, I got to go now. This is I'm super pumped up. I'm really, really focused on this one thing. Or we can go, okay, expand our narrowed vision, relax.
So essentially, like, break out of like our paradigms, right? Which are like deeply constructed into our brain, and then kind of like reconstruct our whole subconscious. You mean like kind of like rewiring the brain? Is that like how?
I would say it's more of a cheat code. I think that the reconstructing of the brain is a little bit more of a macro scale idea.
Okay.
So that would be changing how we actually react to fear and how we react to things that we're afraid of and that we're scared of and that make us anxious. But so we can change the way that we react to those things over time. And because it's a reflex, even telling the truth is a reflex.
Yeah.
Doing the quote unquote right thing, it's a reflex. And we can change that reflex. But I believe that the first step to that is changing your behavior in a moment. So it's one moment where you have the opportunity to lie about something, or to avoid failure, or to avoid anxiety and being scared of something. And you dive into that thing and you say, tell the truth, or post that thing that you've been hesitant to post because you're scared of how people will perceive you, or saying something to your peers that you don't feel that they'll receive, that they will be receptive to. It's those things that will in turn restructure your brain. But I think that those practices that I've been talking about with breath work, I believe that those are ways that we can access the ability to actually change those little micro, what would that be, like a micro action. So you can change those micro actions, and then over time that'll change the physiology of your brain. Something that I find interesting is that as you go down that path, your dreams will change.
So Josh, like, how do you catch these things? Like, let's say when you were talking about that, like, the moment, like, let's say you were about to tell a lie, but you decided not to. So how do you, like, catch these things? Like, how do you become self-aware or self-aware of these things, that, hey, like, okay, this is the thing which has been happening, and then how do you come out of that? Like, when do you know is the time to stop? Is this something like that, like, you take the step once, then automatically the next time you find that you're doing it, or like how does that work?
No, far from it. It takes a long time, and stress can actually revert back. I referred to that earlier, how stress can actually revert back those changes that you've made, because so one example is that it's really, really hard to quit smoking,
True.
especially cigarettes, because it over time it becomes, you've associated your cigarette with feeling good and dopamine, and that gives you an instant hit of something. Good. That's your something good neural circuitry. Dopamine is that neurochemical that makes you feel good when you do something good, or also something bad, potentially smoking, potentially eating chocolate. And but people have found that it's the lead up to that thing that releases more dopamine than the thing itself. But with smoking, you can quit smoking and you can be okay. And then you hit a time of stress. And then that increase in stress reverts you back to your old way of thinking where the only way that you can get dopamine is a cigarette. And that's why people have such difficulty quitting smoking, is that once you're reverted back to stress, the means in which you have addressed that stress before come back a lot stronger. So it's not just a one-time change that changes everything. It's a practice. Even those things, telling the truth and doing the right thing, all of that is a practice. And a way that I think that is, for me, the best way to start that process is through a more psychoanalytical perspective. So I think Jung does a really good job at addressing those changes that people make. And he has the concept of the shadow, which is this part of yourself that you kind of put to the side, that you don't really like to look at, that isn't good. So we talked about it a little bit earlier, even how I don't believe that people are intrinsically altruistic all the time. In that Hobbes Rousseau dynamic, I think people are more in the middle, but I think we can go to either side. And with that, you really have to look at yourself and say, what am I capable of? What am I doing right now that I don't like? And you can sit down in a meditation, in anything. You can sit down on your kitchen table with nothing on, close your eyes and ask yourself, what do I have to do? What do I want in life? What am I doing right now that I don't like? And if you pose questions to yourself in a to the point way, you'll get answers. You might not like them, but you'll get them.
But you get them,
Yeah, and with those answers, I think that's the first place. That's the first step to becoming better at being the person that you want in life. To realizing that Jungian self is to acknowledge the shadow and to incorporate them together. So you need to know the things that you're not good at, and you need to be honest with yourself about the things that you're not good at, or the things you want to change. And so I think that awareness is the first step to that.
So it's like kind of like reflecting, and then like kind of like, in a way, like I think you got to like start, you said it beautifully, you got to start like being more honest with yourself. And do you think like you got to like start being more strict towards yourself? Because the normal human tendency is that, okay, the moment you start doing hard things, your brain tells you to go back to the normal, like old things, right, where the things are easier. So do you think like you got to like start telling yourself to be more disciplined? And then in like normal situations, let's say, for example, a person is in a habit of lying constantly, right? And then one day, back of the mind, they know what they're doing wrong. They go back home, they do self-reflection, they, let's say, take out a notebook, start writing about it, and then kind of like self-reflect. But like, what happens, or what's the way where like, you can stop this from happening at that very moment, so that you don't go in regret when you're back home opening your diary again and writing, hey, I could have avoided this if I would have done this. So is there a like easier way where like, it's like spontaneous, where like, okay, this is what I was about to do, but I will not do this. So is there like a easier way, or is it something which, like you mentioned, you got to develop with time?
Yeah, no, it's hard. It's like really, really hard. I
hard,
think, I think one piece of that is really being empathetic with yourself and understanding
with yourself. Okay.
Yeah, this isn't going to be, I do this one time. This isn't a one-time fix-all thing. I think it's really, really hard to develop a more complete personality, and a personality that you would consider to be ideal. I think it takes a lot of time. I think it takes a lot of relapse. One thing for me personally has been like the lying example is something that I try to never lie ever, no matter what. Even if someone asks me a really tough question, I would way rather just
be
give
honest
them the answer than create a fabrication, which is hard a lot of the time. And sometimes you fall back. So someone asks you something and you tell a lie, and that's a part of it. That's a part of that hero's journey. There are dips all over the place. It's not linear. There's not consistent upward growth. That's not something that's sustainable.
Yeah,
We
true.
have to be up
Yeah.
and down a little bit,
Up and down.
and ideally the general line like we go like that, but in that we're still doing this a bunch.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think people really beat themselves up about things, maybe stuff like overeating. Like if you have an eating disorder and you're doing really, really well, and then you have a day where you totally break, the most important thing to do is say, this is a moment. This isn't forever. This is something that's happened here, and I can go back and I can change, and then maybe the next time, maybe the period that you start your diet or your new health fad or something like that, there's a 100-day period where you don't have a relapse, and then you have that relapse, and instead of diverting back and saying, okay, well, that's life now, I'm a failure, I can't do it, I think it's important to be empathetic with ourselves and say, okay, I tried, now I'm going to get back up and I'm going to do it again. And then hopefully the next time that you do it, it lasts for maybe 101 days. And then the next time, maybe 102 days, maybe 103. And then over time, it gets better and better and better and better.
That's true, man. Yeah, you're right. So you got to like start loving yourself more, right? I think like people are too bothered about what other people think about them, or like how much love other people are offering them, and they totally ignore how much love they're not offering themselves, right? People like seek attention from others but don't give themselves the attention they need from them, right? So this is where I think like this is something where like, you know, there's a foundation of going wrong, because the moment something wrong happens, the first thing you do is you go back on beating yourself up.
Yeah, I think that's something like I think people do it a lot, and I haven't read his book yet, but Jordan Peterson has a really good little.
Dude, I love that guy.
Yeah, he has some really really good stuff. He's a very very intelligent man, and he has one point where he says you should treat yourself as if you were your best friend.
Yeah. I think that's the 12 rule book something.
Yeah. 12 rules for life. That was his second book, but that's not verbatim the rule, but I think that's how we should treat ourselves. So if you have like your friend has a relapse, you support your friend.
Yeah.
Support your friend and you let them know that they can do better next time, but you push them as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that we're trained not to do. I think that we're a lot more self-critical on ourselves than we could be. And that point that you said about the time that we give ourselves and the affirmation that we give ourselves. I read this book by Gary Goodman, and it's this book on love languages. So ways that we can express love to our partners. But I think that it's really important to find the way that we can express loves to ourselves. So he has 5 love languages, which are words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, physical touch, and gift giving. And I think that it's important for people to introspect a little bit and say, what are my love languages and how do I express those to myself? Because we're often looking for external sources to get this internal feeling of love. And I don't think it's that simple. I think that we have to understand the way that we react to love and find a way that we can love ourselves the best.
That's true. Yeah. So it all comes down to like how good we are with ourselves, right? What do you think about instant gratification, Josh? Because like nowadays I've seen that like people like, you know, even before achieving their goals, they try to like instantly gratify themselves, like kind of like, you know, taking that that like chase or that like, you know, the discipline out of like achieving something hard and then rewarding themselves, but rather than like let's say that, for example, let me think of a good example. Let's say if I say that, hey, I'm going to work out 6 days a week, and then I do that, or I do 3 days gym in like throughout the week, and I say that, hey, if I do 6 days of workout in a week, I'm gonna eat a pizza on the 7th day.
Mhm.
But like when, let's say, like, I'm halfway through, I'm on the 3rd day, I'm like, hey, I made it halfway through, I'm gonna do the, like, I'm gonna get through the 3 more days. So what I do is I instantly gratify myself. So rather than waiting for like the pizza on the 7th day, I'm eating the pizza on the 3rd day. So it's actually a very poor example, but like my actual question was that, like, do you think like nowadays people are like, rewarding themselves super quickly even before achieving their target? Is that like one like big thing which is holding people back from like pushing limits, or like, going for that hard things in life? Is that something which you think like hinders their progress, instant gratification?
I mean, it definitely could. I've definitely grabbed a brownie off the tray before I'm done my weekly workouts. But so I think that's really tough because it's so momentary based. One thing that I can say about the dopamine system is that if you have a goal here,
Mm-hmm.
the path to that goal is actually what releases the most dopamine.
Yeah.
So for that example, it's those moments before, like, you grab the pizza and
Uh-huh.
you're lifting it to your mouth. That's when
Yeah.
you release the most dopamine.
More dopamine. Yeah.
So in that sense, I think that it's really important for people to have really big goals
Uh-huh.
and also to reward themselves incrementally. So maybe like a little piece of chocolate every single night does better
Uh-huh.
than a pizza at the end of the week or something like that.
True.
But I think that that's, especially when you're starting out on something, it's really, really
Uh,
important to have gratification throughout the process.
uh-huh.
Because if you say it would be a lot tougher to say I'm going to make $1 million by the end of this month than it would be to say I'm going to make, what would that be? I'm not sure, like $60,000 a week. No, not that. That's bad math.
A week, you said?
A
A
hundred.
million? Yeah, that's a lot.
Let's say
Yeah.
$250,000 a week.
Yeah.
Having that's a really bad example that wasn't formulated properly. But it's good to have incremental goals that
Mhm.
allow you to achieve your major goal. But
Major target. Yeah.
I think for me, it's important to have something far away that you actually don't. It's a little bit sticky whether you can achieve it or not. You
Uh-huh.
want to have these really, really big goals that motivate you and that keep you motivated. And throughout that, you want to have goals that will continue to keep you motivated. So you want to have this balance of short and long-term goals. So a long-term vision, short-term goals that will
Yeah.
inevitably bring you to that thing. And the goal is to improve your quality of life at the end. So I'll think of a better example. Let's say you're moving to France in a year. If you incrementally learn French on your way there, it's going to
Yeah.
make your quality of life in France a lot better than if you were to say,
I'm gonna learn it.
yeah,
Right there.
I'm going
On the spot.
to learn French in France. So you want to have these goals
Yeah.
that actually accumulate into
Uh-huh.
into the best quality of life that you can imagine for yourself at the end of that. That's what your incremental goals should be.
Yeah.
The goal of your incremental goals
Uh-huh.
should be to achieve the highest possible quality of life in your end game.
That's a really good example, man. That's a good example. Yeah.
Thanks. That's a lot better than the $1 million, hey?
Yeah.
I fumbled that one.
I was actually like, gone. I was like, okay, what can it be? I was gone in the numbers.
Yeah,
The
no,
calculation. I was
numbers are bad. Examples with numbers are bad.
Yeah.
What about you though, man? You've made a big journey from working at a Fortune 500 to investing in Fortune 500s, and that's now your main stream of support for yourself.
Yeah. The transition wasn't like easy, man. Like I really loved my job, and like then COVID happened. Getting laid off was something which came as a shocker.
Mm-hmm.
And then like I had no option, man. I had no choice. Like there were only two options: either like go back to India, like finish everything,
Mhm.
or like there was the second option to like fight back, man, and like to do something. So then I decided to learn a new skill. I was always fascinated by this trading industry, like, you know,
Mhm.
I always loved the way like the prices moved and how you could make money off that. And I had this like very big thing where I wanted to like work for myself rather than like working for anyone else. So that happened. Then I put like a lot of work into that. I had to spend like lots of like sleepless nights. But then at the end of the day, like you said, man, like I took everything incrementally, like slowly, to reach towards the bigger goal, which was financial freedom and to be on my own terms. It took some time, slowly, and I'm still not there. But like today, like I'm really proud where I have reached. So the
Mhm.
journey has been really exciting. And I think, like, you know, that's one thing which I think most of the people nowadays should really think about and work on, is that this COVID actually gave us, you know, a picture of how uncertainty revolves around us, right? You're never sure what's going to happen next.
Mhm.
So a lot of people, they lost their jobs, and like, you know, they like, for example, me, and then they didn't have anything to fall back onto, right? So there's nothing, like no skills to learn, nothing to do. A lot of people, they decided to live off on the government's aid, right?
Mhm.
Just to make their life easier, to fall back on that one thing. But my goal or my thing was that you gotta be like, you know, self-sufficient, man. Like you gotta like have that skill, no matter like something happens, like XYZ happens, the economy crashes, it doesn't impact you that much, right?
Mhm.
So what do you think on that? Like what are your thoughts on like developing a skill set, and then like, you know, having an extra skill on the side to kind of go with your main gig?
Yeah. Skills are just, it's such an intangible thing now that even if someone has a degree, I don't think that it inherently means that they have the skills. I think skills can be built
True,
outside of
true,
universities. I
true.
think more and more people are going to start stepping away from universities, especially in the current climate where
Mm-hmm.
the value of a university degree was intangible because it taught you how to be a part of clubs and be a part
Yeah,
of groups, and you
yeah.
got to meet people and public speak and develop
Mm-hmm,
relationships
mm-hmm,
with people, and
mm-hmm.
you develop a relationship with your professor and they teach you things and you teach things to your peers, and you get to go through your degree with this group of people that you slowly
Mm-hmm.
become friends with, and you find a community, and all of
Mm-hmm.
these things are vanishing now. And
Yeah,
I
totally.
so I think something's going to end up filling that vacuum.
Uh-huh.
um I'm my aim is to be a part of that vacuum filler, which I think
Mm-hmm.
would be a lot of fun. And so I think that people can develop their skills outside of an institution. You can learn how to
Absolutely,
do you
absolutely.
can learn how to do home improvement on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah.
You can practice all of these things and redo your entire house. And then you can start to, if you become good enough something, people are going to pay you
Mm-hmm.
for it. There's
Mm-hmm.
not there's not this there's this fallacy that that people will give you things if you have a piece of paper, you have experience,
Yeah,
but if you have skills, that nothing can, like, nobody's going to hire you. Nobody's going to not hire you if you have all of the skills that they could ask for and more.
true,
So
true.
I think that the more that you learn and the more that you increase your capacity to learn and
Mm-hmm.
your ability to learn,
Yeah.
then you're going to be more and more desirable to anyone who would like to have you.
Anyone, yeah. And you're absolutely right, man. And like for me, you know, like what I realized, this thought actually came to me while I was sleeping one night, is that like, um, for example, man, like, you know, in a hypothetical situation, let's say a person, normal person, who is making $100,000 a year, loses his job, and
Mhm.
like he has mortgage on his head, he has his car payments on his head, he has XYZ expenses lined up, right?
Mhm.
And let's say there are like no jobs, the unemployment rate is super high. What are you going to do? Like there's nothing to do, right?
Mhm.
There's nothing to fall back onto. Whereas like, let's say if you have a skill, or if you're a plumber, if you know how to fix cars,
Mhm.
something goes down, you can go to people's house. Or if you know, like, if you're good at polishing cars, you can go knock people's door that, hey, you know, I'll polish your car in 30 minutes, $50, right? So
Mhm.
there's that skill set, you can survive. So it
Mhm.
brings back to the topic of survival. So
Mhm.
the question I think people should be asking themselves is that, do we, or do they have the capability to survive if shit goes down, right?
Mhm.
Like let's say if hypothetically I'm working for an IT firm and I don't know what's my backup plan and shit goes down. The question I would be asking myself, hey, in the worst case scenario, if like there's no job, if I lose my job, can I survive, right? Do you think like,
Mhm.
I think like lots of people are not focusing on this because of the way like the universities or school bring up education. They focus more on like getting that piece of paper that, hey, you need this degree to get this job,
Mhm.
but they kind of like shorten the scope of their thinking, their vision, that hey, what's beyond the job thing, right? What's beyond the scope of getting a job? Is there like something else which you can achieve, rather than like just focusing on that one like dogma where like everyone is focused so much on jobs? What do you think, like what are your like thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's this growing there's a growing desire, I think, that people have for self actualization.
Mm-hmm.
So people want to be the best versions of themselves and to
Yeah.
be happy in doing that. I think I think happiness is a difficult thing to chase because I think that it's
Oh,
momentary,
super difficult.
but people want to be content
Correct.
with their
Correct.
lives.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is for a lot of people, I think that can't be achieved in a day-to-day desk job.
Mm-hmm.
I think that more and more we've been provided with opportunities and avenues that will allow
Yeah.
people to thrive outside of those environments.
Correct. Correct.
I think TikTok is a really, really fun, interesting example of that, where
Mm-hmm.
there hasn't really been a, a, a market for hyper creative textile people.
Yeah.
So my girlfriend is super into sewing and textile work and pottery,
Uh-huh.
and now there's this area where people can really dive into those interests
Yeah.
and market themselves in a way that they can survive while doing something that they can love. They've
Absolutely.
slowly become
Absolutely.
self-actualized
Absolutely.
through that.
Yeah. Absolutely, man.
Mhm.
And TikTok is crazy, man. Like this one dude, like I think his name was Dogface. This dude like made millions, man, just like skateboarding
Mhm.
on his like just on his skateboard, drinking like I think some vodka or something, and like he got like millions, man. Like
Mhm.
he went viral. So it's super easy, like to make money nowadays if you got the knack for it, right?
Mhm.
And then I also believe that there are like positives and drawbacks to social media, because I nowadays feel that people for people it's easier to say than to do, right? Like people talk big words, but then when
Mhm.
it comes to follow up with actions, a lot of people are following short on that. Like what do you think, like why do you think that that's happening?
I think that's always been an issue. I think that's I think large aspirations and falling short on follow through is
Uh-huh.
not only something that's been happening in the past 10 years since social media has evolved, but I think that's something that humans have done for forever, because it feels really
Centuries.
good to
Yeah.
say, I'm going to do
Yeah.
this thing. I'm going to take down that lion. To actually take down
Mhm.
that lion is really, really tough. You have to have a particular skill set and a
True.
drive to do that thing.
True.
And it's tough to learn those skills. To be conscientious is something that's quite stable.
Mm-hmm.
You can change
Mm-hmm.
it, you can move it,
Yeah.
but it's something that's difficult to change. It's one of those it's one of those neural pathways. How long can you sit down at a desk for and just work? How many jobs can you work at the same time,
Yeah.
even if it's something that still
Yeah.
actualizes you? How can you, if you have all of these interests, let's say you want to be a writer and a content developer and a gardener
Mm-hmm.
and this and that, your ability to sit down and write and develop content and research and garden, all of those things, your work ethic plays a role into that. So it is
True.
really easy
True.
to say, hey, I'm going to go do this thing, but for me it's more about, what's the process like? How do I get better at doing those things? How do I become better at being conscientious, at working? How can I sit down at a desk for longer and study? How can I optimize my time? How can I, and it's not only because you can't just do those things. It's really tough to sit down and do the same thing for 16 hours a day. I think that more and more we're going to find that there are mechanisms such as breath that will allow us to optimize our time between focus and relaxation. So how do you most optimally relax? How do you most optimally concentrate? And for me, I've found that that's through breath work.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to know, man. So I think like you mentioned a lot, like meditation is something which really plays a key role in like, you know, your self-development.
Mm-hmm.
I personally like used to meditate a lot before, but then I slowly like, you know, kind of like got out of it. But I think like now talking to you, man, I actually feel inspired to, you know, get back into meditation because I feel that I miss that like kind of like focus and, you know, power of self-realization to be present in the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than like just like phasing out, zoning out in your brain, like to be present in the moment. I think I really miss that feeling as opposed to like when I used to have that when I used to meditate. So I think that's something I'm going to work on, man. Meditation is something very powerful.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad that you're getting back into it. Full disclosure, I totally ebb and flow in and out of my meditation practices. Sometimes I won't meditate. For when I was playing volleyball in Europe, I didn't really meditate. There was a lot of other stuff going on. I was working like 3 jobs at the same time, and I found that it was more beneficial for me to come home and turn on the TV and basically fall asleep than to sit down and meditate. It takes a lot of it's one thing to be motivated to do something, and it's another thing to have the intrinsic desire to go forward and dive into something to an extent where at the end of it you're going to be your best self. Those are two totally different areas. Where if you're motivated, that's you listen to an audio clip on YouTube and you go, whoa, I'm jacked, I'm ready to go to the gym. Whereas when you wake up and that audio is not there, that has to come from somewhere inside. So for me, it's not a constant ebb and it is an ebb and flow. It's this, we have these crests and these troughs of doing the things that are good for us. But I think as long as you know what's good for you and as long as you know where you want to go, then you can slowly push yourself back into it. I've been meditating a lot more lately, which I think has helped a lot. But it's really easy to, when things stop being tough, it's easy to let go of the things that got you to that space.
That's true. Very well said, man. That's true. Yeah. That's powerful. Wow. Even like cold showers, man. Like, you know, I remember like we really connected on talking about cold showers back in the day. I still take cold showers every day, man. I think like that's something which really gets me through my day because you do the most toughest thing in the morning, man. Like you start your morning with so much like stress on your body, and then everything like slowly, you know, nothing can phase you out. Nothing can like, you know, move you. Like nothing can like stop you from like pursuing that thing. So I think cold showers is something which really helps me. But meditation is, I think, the next thing I should incorporate into my lifestyle.
I think we talked
Even
about that a
working
lot.
out. Yeah.
We talked about that a lot initially with the cold showers, was starting your day on the floor. Like if you have a floor of your mood, like that cold shower is your hell. And everything up from there is ascending to heaven, basically.
I remember, man, like you used to take those fucking ice baths in the interior, remember? Yeah, that was good, man. I think I feel that like, you know, in one person's like lifetime, people should fucking take part in one sport. Sports actually, you know, builds the character and gives you the mental toughness, right? To be prepared for and gives you the discipline to be prepared for life moving forward. So really feel that like students like throughout their life should play one sport at least.
Well, even the team aspect of you learn how to deal with interpersonal conflict. If you put 12, 20 guys into a room together, 12, 20 girls, there are going to be people that disagree, and you have to find a way to deal with that. You have to be able to say to people, hey, I don't agree with what you're saying, but I respect you. and I respect what you're
Correct.
doing, and let's learn how to grow together, because you're all moving towards the same goal. And I think that's an issue with politics right now. The political climate is that people are either saying it's this or that. And I really
Correct.
think it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think that everyone here is right, and I don't think that everyone here is right, but I think that there are enough truths in both of them that we can meet somewhere in the middle.
In the middle, yeah.
But if you, I mean, with the team, you're forced into a room with those people, and you have to come to some kind of conclusion where you say, hey, I agree with this, I don't agree with that,
Yeah.
but let's work together to get this thing. Let's work together to be the best version of ourselves and to accomplish this thing that we're looking at down the road.
Yeah.
And I think
And
being in
also,
the same room helps. But
also I feel it makes you a bigger person also, right? Like you learn how to adjust with others, or like sometimes like there's something which you want, but you kind of like put your wants down towards to let like other people's wants up. Like did that happen to you like ever, like in sports, like where like you had to like let go of something you wanted just to make sure that your teammates are happier because they had something different they wanted, right?
Yeah, totally. I think I got better at it towards the end of my time, but being able to put yourself to the side and being able to put your ego to the side for a little bit and support the people around you and want the best for the people around you. And that's really tough. That's going against that intrinsic, that intrinsic desire to be great, to be the absolute best. And sometimes it's just a little shift in your perspective of saying, I'm going to be great at this rather than I'm going to be great at this. So maybe it's an internal perspective change, but I think that it's unbelievably difficult to put other people at the forefront. And I mean, that's, I assume, what it's like to have a kid. Like you have to change your entire life, and this person is this person means more than you do.
He's like your world.
Yeah, exactly. And in sports, you have to do that a lot, where sometimes people play roles. I've played roles in the past where I had to be someone that would come in off the bench and was expected to do a job. And it's not a glamorous job or anything like that, but and if you show up more and more and more and more, and you consistently get better in your role, then occasionally you start to overtake people that are ahead of you. But it starts off as just as playing a role for the team and just doing your job. You don't have to worry about the big things and everyone else. You just have to worry about doing your job to the best of your capability, not worrying about other people. And then once you can do that, then you can start to worry about other people and say, hey, I think that you're doing this. I think that we would benefit as a team if you did this a little bit better, or if you change your technique here or there, or something along those lines.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, it was a really good session today, man.
Yeah, man. It was good to catch up.
Yeah, it was good to catch up, bro. I miss you, man. Like, when will you be back in Kamloops? I'll come visit you. It's been a long time.
I'm back here now, but I have to. So
you're leaving for Arizona soon, right?
Yeah. So I'm leaving next Friday. I would consider it essential travel because I'm learning how to walk again. So yeah, I'm heading down there next week, but I'll let you know when I'm back around in town and we can get together.
Sounds good, man. Well, it was good catching up. So when are you back? You said 90 days. Are you going for 3 months?
I'm aiming for 2 right now. We'll see what travel restrictions look like.
Okay.
But I'll keep you in the loop. I'm sure we'll keep in touch.
Yeah. Let's keep in touch, man. And then once you're back, let's get back onto this, man. Get some more good things. I think I really need to work on like the flow of my speech and like the wordings, because that's something which you mentioned in at the very start. I need to really work on that. So this really gave me a good sense of a demo of how to work on things and what things I need to work on.
Yeah. Oh, it's
any
it's
suggestions,
tough,
man? Any suggestions for me, moving forward? Because since you'll be gone for 2 months, I'll have some time to prepare. So anything you suggest I should work on to get better?
Watch this.
Watch this.
Watch this. Yeah, watch this video, and I'm sure there'll be things that stick out to you like a sore thumb that you go, I want to change that. I want to change that. I want to change that. Just study yourself.
Okay, awesome, man. Loved it, bro.
Mhm. It was good to talk to you, brother. Love you.
It was amazing talking to you, Josh. Thanks for this, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Take care. Give your mom my love
I will.
and travel safe, bro.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, brother. Love you.
Yeah, love you, bro. Take care.
Bye.